name is Susann Worschech. I'm a research associate here at the Master Studies program European Studies at the Viadrina University in Frankfurt, Odesa.
And I'm a professor of European Studies. Timm Beichelt is my name. I've been teaching here for more than 15 years now. At Viadrina, which is, maybe that's not known to everybody, is a prominent university project in Europe because it's located on the German-Polish border, right, close to the river, and is therefore situated on the old Iron Curtain and the border between Germany and Poland.
Transnational Ukraine is a book that stems from a conference which we held here at the Viadrina University in November 2015 with many researchers coming from Germany and Ukraine and Poland, Canada, Sweden, and some other countries. And we decided to do this compilation of texts and research projects on Ukraine with the idea that Ukraine can maybe better be understood in its contemporary situation when we look out for transnational ties and networks and all the things that might be rooted in transnational interactions. So that was sort of starting point, our first idea, and we brought together now several research projects and articles that are focusing, for example, on the Transnationality of Novorossiya, the so-called Novorossiya part of eastern Ukraine, and economic transnational aspects and many empirical studies like these.
We have both a scholarly and to some extent political message with this. The scholarly message is that most of Ukrainian studies have focused on nation building in recent years, especially if you look at books like at the big books which are out there in the field. And while we do not denounce that, we simply see also from the location of our university, which does border studies, that a lot of political processes, societal processes in Ukraine are somehow interlinked and cannot be reduced to the national paradigm. So this was, so to say, a message we want to get over. And the second is that the political message implied with this, that we are somehow worried a bit because this idea that, Ukraine is not a nation, you can hear that often from persons, for example, in Russia or in other countries, which somehow question the right of existence of Ukraine. But we are opposed to that idea. We do not want to talk about we do not want to say that Ukraine doesn't have a right for existence, but we just want to put the scholarly focus on the fact that there is a lot of transnational ties in and around Ukraine. Very broadly, we locate the term between the national on the one hand and international on the other. The national would be the focus on the nation or on a state. International would be interactions between states. And transnational is when states do exist, and there is also an international order, but there is a lot of transnational ties, especially concerning society, civil society, the economy, so to say, social interaction which goes beyond the state.
And I think that's maybe the most important point. It is about networks, and it is about cooperation patterns, networks patterns, ties that bring people from different national entities together. So transnationalism has sort of structure within these networks.
There is 10 articles. Themes are Novorossiya, so this region declared by Russia as a region between today's Russian Federation, Odesa, and even Transnistria. Then we have Yulia Yurchuk, who writes on memory politics within Ukraine. We have Alexander Clarkson, who writes on the impact of the Maidan uprising on the Ukrainian diaspora. We have the international links of Ukrainian oligarchs and Ukraine in the Russian mass media in Germany, which is a project which conducted in Germany. And then Ukrainian nation building and ethnic minority associations in southern Bessarabia. And a couple more articles. So it's the articles, the manuscripts are connected by the fact that phenomena are located in Ukraine which have links and ties beyond Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for example, in southern Bessarabia, you have minorities who refer to Bulgaria, who refer to Moldova. Novorossiya, of course, has linkages to Russia and Russian history. So these type of phenomena.
I mean, these were very diverse empirical projects. They were not linked before. That's why we put them together in this book. It's the first time, and we had them on the conference. I think what was really interesting was to see, for example, how regional political structures stem from a sort of mixture of a melting of different national backgrounds in southern Bessarabia. So this is an ethnographic study which is extremely interesting, I think. And to see how these transnational ties are melted and focused in one point in Ukraine was, for me, extremely surprising and extremely interesting. And then second, we have a wonderful study on the change of symbols after Euromaidan, how to commemorate historical events in Ukraine, and this was also a very impressive empirical study.
And then we have a few studies on the very problematic zone at the moment, Novorossiya, Donbass, so these areas where there's a lot of fights, not only violent fights, but also symbolic fights. And that was quite interesting, first to have authors who are capable of somehow catching, let's say, both positions, of looking into the perspective of the Russian-speaking population of Ukraine and their feelings, their thoughts, their ideas towards Ukraine. This study was done by Mikhailo Minakov, who was a professor at Mohila Academy in Kiev, and he did a study on social networks of persons who promote the Novorossiya idea, and found divisions between those persons from the West, or at least from Germany. They are all seen as somehow backward Russian nationalists, and he somehow makes distinctions. Some of them are imperialists, others simply feel alienated within their home states, which are Ukraine or Moldova. So that gives us interesting insights, I think, to better understand contemporary Ukraine. In a way, it's true, Novorossiya is not such a prominent phenomenon at the moment anymore. On the other hand, what Mikhailo Minakov found were ideas and attitudes of persons, mostly of maybe who speak Russian, who feel attached to Russia, to the Soviet Union, but sometimes also to the Russian Empire. And I wouldn't know, I mean, has there so much changed? I mean, maybe those people are not so prominent in promoting Novorossiya anymore. But it seems to me, or I think to both of us, quite obvious that there is a part of the population in Ukraine which somehow does not really completely like, let's say, the course of events at the moment. And we're not saying the one or the other side is right or wrong. That's not our topic. We just want to hint at certain ambivalences, if you wish, in these populations, and therefore I would not really say that there's one article in the book which is outdated by now.
Yeah, and what I would like to add is that in the other article on this Novorossiya phenomenon, you can trace networks back to the years of 2004, 2005, where we can see that even in this time there were groups like militarist summer camps, things like that, where several people who then became important in these so-called republics very many years later, they became connected there. And I think that this study shows us the persistence and the relevance of those networks. So you can see that there are some people who are like a spider in the web and who became then prominent when the political situation had the opportunity for them. And I think that's something important also to look on the sort of maybe youth movements or political movements that are not on the side that we are used to see on movements. That means the progressive political one. But there is also a side of maybe dark civil society, of dark political movements that are established networks which will only work out a few years later when the political things change. So I think this study is extremely interesting in tracing networks like these. Well, this is an ethnographical study that was conducted in some more or less villages and small cities in this Bessarabia region, and it explains how political campaign was run based on these ethnic, not cleavages, but based on ethnic divisions or affiliations of the people there. And I think there is a good reason why the author did not look at Odesa, because Odesa is a melting pot. I mean, it's a bigger city, or it's a big city, and I think that these clientelist networks that were observed in the small cities and in the villages won't play out so much in Odesa or in metropolitan regions.
And also we somehow did not focus on Odesa or on Kiev or on national politics, also because we have the feeling that there's other persons who do that better than us, and there's a lot of commenting going on, especially in Odesa, of course, in the last year, but also on national politics. And we just wanted to have an alternative view without saying that the other view, the view on the national perspective or on the big centers of Ukraine is not necessary. It's more a complementary endeavor. Viadrina is called European University Viadrina, with a research focus on borders, on the liminality of borders, on the fact that borders are not as strict as they are often taken for. And but it's also European studies from our perspective means to take a look not only at capitals, not to only look at the big nations of Europe, but also what is sometimes called periphery. And Kiev is not periphery, but if you go to some of the Ukrainian cities, with little modern transport which links them to Europe, or now with problems of those from there getting to Russia because of the new restrictions. So you have a certain alternative look, I would say, which stems from the perspective we usually take. We also have a lot of scholars working here on Eastern Poland, for example, on East Germany, not on Berlin, but on East German provinces. We have persons who look on the peripheries of Europe instead of looking at the centers like Paris or Brussels. So it's more, we use the knowledge we have from other fields and transfer it to Ukrainian studies.
Yeah, but I think, of course we have our personal research profiles, and at the Viadrina University in general, I think people are doing much empirical research. Maybe there is a certain difference to those, let's say, researchers from the area studies who look at Ukraine in a rather descriptive, analytical way. And I think this is extremely important, but that's not our point, and that's not also what we are doing best. I mean, there are people, of course, from Ukraine and others who describe things very much in detail and very interesting. And I think that especially looking at networks and at transnational relations is something where we at the Viadrina also can stand for. I think it's an extremely interesting approach to see things and political phenomena in a relational perspective, because it can tell us very much about sorts of hidden hierarchies, power structures, interaction structures, exchange structures. These things are extremely important. I think if we want to understand what's going on, in particular in Ukraine, we have to see how people interact and not only look at political institutions and descriptions. So I think beyond all these attributes, like being sort of specific nationality or living in a specific area or city or whatever, the most important thing is about, how people interact, what people understand and misunderstand from others, what do they exchange. I think this is an extremely important and interesting, also methodological, interesting and rich approach.
Let's not forget about the overall political context of Europe. For the last at least 25 years, there's been a lot of talking of Europe growing together, ever closer union, Eastern enlargement, association as a first step possibly of enlargement, Europe growing more and more together. And in that context, of course, a lot of societal ties develop. You have a lot of, at our university we have a good 4 or 5% of students who are from Ukraine. At our university, there's 25% of students who are not from Germany but from the European countries, and this is, it's not an exception, and therefore it is clear in a way that developments, also political developments in Ukraine, somehow get this transnational dimension, and that you make a mistake in a way if you look at it only with the terminology and the thinking of Ukraine as a nation state, which then has relations to the European Union as a bunch of other nation states. There's a lot of things going on within European integration, if you like that or not, which goes below the state level. And that makes transnationalism important, we think. In the introduction to our book, we explicitly state that we, of course, agree that Ukraine or the Ukrainian people has a right of self-determination, both political, legal, from all points of view. And therefore, it's at least I have the feeling that we're not politically correct, because we write explicitly that Russian strategies in the Donbass and with regard to Crimea are not right. Yeah, I mean they're in a way they break international law and they are responsible for killing people. Russian politicians are lying when they say there is no Russian soldiers in the Donbass. So there is not this. I don't know. In German political science, I mean, you have different people with different positions, and if you have persons, especially who work on war, and the dangers of war and reasons for war to break out, and what can you do to prevent war, you find some scholars also in Germany who try to understand Russia, who somehow are afraid of escalation because of their study of previous wars. I mean, those exist, but I don't think that political correctness in that sense that you cannot say what you want because of some Russian politicians or whatever, or money in the background is relevant in me. I don't think so. But of course, I mean, you have professors on Ukraine who I would name in a way nationalist Ukrainian, yeah, and you have some other political scientists who somehow take the Russian position maybe because they were born in Russia and don't like, so to say, the fact that nationalist politicians are in government in Ukraine. So I mean, you have this, but this you have in all countries, I think, and it's that's politics, and we are never free of letting politics into our thinking, but we have the obligation to mark what we think and to start an analysis from there.
I think it's important, and that is also one thing that we wanted to achieve with this book, is to get deeper into what's going on in the different debates and in the different regions in Ukraine. So, for example, when in one of our texts, and Tim already cited that, when authors analyzes to which extent people in the very eastern parts of Ukraine feel sort of or do agree to this idea of Novorossiya or not. I think what we want to do is not being politically correct or politically incorrect. We try to explain together with our authors what's going on there, what people are thinking, why there are supporters of these ideas. And I mean, there are these supporters, and we try just to get a sort of understanding. And I think that is political and non-political at the same time, because we want to provide knowledge for good political decisions, of course. But it's not our point to say who's the good guy and who's the bad guy here. I think that's a sort of political opinion building. That's not our point.
Our university has a program which is called Ukraine Calling, and it's directed towards persons of different civil society organizations who work in Ukraine or with Ukraine. So for them, that can be used by them. We teach, of course. It's a teaching university, both teaching and research. So we have at least 2 or 3 seminars, lectures, whatever, on Ukraine every semester. There's field trips going on, so it's somehow embedded into broad activities. Unfortunately, or luckily, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't have another Ukraine book now on my desk. Now I'm going to write. I'm going to write about football and the way it's embedded in Russian politics for the World Cup 2018.
I have a Ukraine book on my desk. That is my dissertation, which will be out, but only in German in this summer. And it is about external democracy promotion and the structuration of civil society in this context in Ukraine. And actually, I'm also working on an analysis of the post-Maidan civil society in Ukraine.
The general conclusion is that it's worthwhile to take another perspective, which is transnational. That you get to know and to get to understand things which escape your views, which escape your eye if you only look through the lens of nationalism, of methodological nationalism. And we have a bunch of interesting studies on different topics, on anthropology of Bessarabia, on attitudes of persons supporting Novorossiya, on memory politics in Ukraine. So for anybody who is interested in Ukrainian societal development of today, will hopefully find a few interesting manuscripts there.
And I think we're trying to encourage readers and other scholars maybe to go beyond and below the national level at the same time by tracing and analyzing networks.
I mean, it's a post-socialist society dependent on a lot of bureaucrats which have their education still from Soviet times and which are dependent from from people. You can call them oligarchs, or at least you should call them persons who have done a lot, business for a long time, but which are not used to listen to adhere to the legal or political system. And so probably it's not the right approach to tell something to one person. It's more like the general frame which would lead the Ukrainian public to not distrusting everybody who is out there just because he's in politics, but also to those in charge, both in the both economic and political elites, to somehow orient themselves, to have enough to trust the state of law and to trust also the functioning of the state of law, to orient themselves more towards a legal frame. This is probably what I think. Is one of the worst insufficiencies of the Ukrainian system. Too much depends on politicians, including Poroshenko, even if he's the president. Both of us have done comparative studies also of post-socialist and post-Soviet countries, and those countries which are stable, successful, and also who have good state in the good economic state and so on. They usually have different elites, so it's not one person or one circle, but they have different circles which share power, and this is what I guess democracy is about. But at least we can see that Ukraine is in a state of getting to that. Maybe at least there is more hope than there was in the last 15 or 20 years. And so I wouldn't know if I was wiser than Poroshenko. He knows much of that himself, I think.
Yeah, I think we should keep in mind that democratization is based on increasing inclusiveness of political systems. So if there is a possibility to better build trust networks throughout the society and to reduce the influence of autonomous power centers, as for example the oligarchic system or the oligarchic structures are still in Ukraine, I think that would be an important way to or for progress of democratization in Ukraine. And one very important point here is, for example, when you look at the civil society law, which was only, I think it passed the parliament just a few days ago, civil society again is threatened in Ukraine, and I think it's important to keep up the freedom of civil society as it is since Euromaidan, to integrate people from the civil society and civic organizations increasingly into public politics and to broaden the whole political process. So the participation of so many people who were active during and after the Euromaidan should be more stable, more sustainable. And I think that's an important point for democratization, but I'm not sure if democratization is really what is focused at in Ukraine.
So thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Wiedersehen.